The first-class passenger mocked the greasy mechanic, then the pilot announced an emergency. He looked at my oil-stained hands, my worn boots, my faded jacket, and then he laughed. "First class is for paying passengers," he said, "not greasy mechanics." A few people chuckled. I didn't respond. I just buckled my seatbelt. Because while he saw a mechanic, he didn't realize I was the only person on that plane who truly understood how it worked. And then the pilot's voice came over the intercom. "Ladies and gentlemen, we have an emergency." The cabin went silent. Welcome back to the channel. This one is about assumptions, humility, and what happens when arrogance meets reality at 30,000 feet. But before we take off, where are you watching from right now? Drop your country and city in the comments. I love seeing how far this community reaches around the world. And if you enjoy intense edge-of-your-seat stories with powerful twists and satisfying karma, make sure you subscribe, like this video, and turn on notifications so you never miss a new upload. Trust me. By the end of this flight, that passenger wasn't laughing anymore. I was boarding a flight to Zurich, carrying my specialized tool bag and wearing my oil-stained jumpsuit. I had just finished a double shift and was catching a lift to the next hub. As I walked through first class to get to my seat, a man in a $5,000 suit pulled his legs back as if I were a walking virus. He told the flight attendant that the help shouldn't be allowed to walk through the premium cabin because I smelled like a gas station. He called me a grease monkey and laughed about how some people are born to fly the plane and others are born to scrub the engines. He thought I was just a low-level janitor. He didn't realize that in 10 minutes I'd be the only person on this plane he'd be praying to see. The passenger, Mr. Henderson, is holding a glass of pre-flight champagne. He stops me by putting his hand on my tool bag. "Watch where you're swinging that bag, kid," Henderson sneered, wiping an invisible speck of dust off his Italian leather shoes. "This isn't a bus. If you can't afford a shower, you should be in the cargo hold with the rest of the luggage. Flight attendant, can we get some air freshener over here? The working class is ruining my Pinot Noir." 30 minutes into the flight, the plane shuddered. Not a little turbulence, a deep metallic clunk followed by the terrifying sound of an engine flameout. The lights flickered, and the oxygen mask dropped. The cabin was a sea of screaming passengers, and Mr. Henderson was the loudest of them all. His champagne spilled all over his expensive suit. The captain's voice came over the intercom, tight with stress. "Ladies and gentlemen, we have a catastrophic failure in the hydraulic system. We are declaring an emergency. If there is any certified flight engineer on board, please press your call button immediately." I stood up, unbuckled my seatbelt, and grabbed my tool bag. As I walked back through first class, Henderson grabbed my arm, his face white as a sheet. "What are you doing?" he whimpered. "Sit down. We're going to die." I looked down at his hand on my sleeve and then directly into his eyes. "I'm going to do my job, Mr. Henderson. The job you said belonged in the cargo hold. I'm the lead turbine specialist for this entire airline. If I don't get into that cockpit and bypass the hydraulic leak, this gas station smell is the last thing you're ever going to worry about." 20 minutes of silence followed, broken only by the sound of me working under the floorboards of the cockpit. Then the engine roared back to life. The plane leveled out. When I finally walked back into the cabin, my face was covered in hydraulic fluid and sweat. The entire plane started to clap, except for Henderson. I stopped at his seat. He wouldn't even look at me. He was staring at his shoes, which were now soaked in spilled wine and hydraulic mist. "You know, Henderson," I said, wiping my hands on a rag, "you were right about one thing. Some people are born to fly the plane, but without the grease monkeys you despise, those people are just sitting in a very expensive metal coffin. You should remember that the next time you feel like looking down on someone in a jumpsuit." I turned to the lead flight attendant. "By the way, check Mr. Henderson's ticket. He's a corporate partner, right? Send a note to the CEO of his firm. Tell them that their representative's behavior nearly compromised a flight-critical repair. I think he needs a permanent upgrade to the no-fly list." I sat back down in my seat as we touched down safely. People think status is about the cabin you sit in, but real status is being the person who can fix the world when it breaks. Henderson has his money, but I have the keys to the sky, and I'll take the smell of jet fuel over his perfume any day. Landing confirmed. The flight was supposed to be a smooth 9 hours. Then, a bone-jarring crack echoed through the fuselage, followed by a violent yaw that sent drink carts crashing into the bulkheads. The steady hum of the right engine vanished, replaced by a haunting, hollow whistle. The fastened seatbelt sign didn't just ding. It flashed red as the cabin pressure dropped, and the yellow oxygen mask tumbled from the ceiling like plastic ghosts. Panic erupted instantly. Mr. Henderson dropped his glass, the vintage Pinot Noir staining his $5,000 suit a deep, bloody red. He was hyperventilating into his mask, his hands shaking so hard he couldn't even tighten the straps. Over the intercom, the captain's voice was strained, fighting to be heard over the wind shear. This is the captain. We've had a double hydraulic failure and a flameout in engine 2. We are losing pressure. If there is any licensed A&P mechanic or flight engineer on board, please identify yourself to the crew immediately. We have a manual override that is jammed. I didn't hesitate. I ripped off my mask. I knew we had enough air for a few minutes at this altitude, and grabbed my carbon fiber toolkit from the overhead bin. As I stepped back into the first-class aisle, Henderson reached out, his face a mask of pure terror. He grabbed my grease-stained sleeve with a grip like a vice. "Where are you going? Stay down. We're going to crash. Help me." I looked down at his trembling hand, then leaned in close so he could hear me over the roar of the depressurizing cabin. "You called me the help 10 minutes ago, Henderson," I said, my voice steady and cold. "You said I belonged in the cargo hold. Well, right now, the help is the only thing standing between you and a crater in the Alps. That gas station smell you hated? That's the smell of the guy who's about to crawl into the hellhole of this plane and fix the landing gear you're currently praying for." I shoved my way past him, headed for the cockpit. The lead flight attendant met me at the door, her eyes wide. "Are you the engineer?" "I'm the guy who built this specific engine model at the plant in Seattle," I said, cracking my toolkit open. "Get the passengers quiet. I've got work to do." The silence in the cabin was heavier than the turbulence. For 20 grueling minutes, the only sound was the muffled metallic clanking coming from beneath the cockpit floor. Then suddenly, a mechanical groan vibrated through the floorboards, the sound of the hydraulic lines finally opening. The right engine coughed, roared, and stabilized. The plane leveled out. The cockpit door hissed open. I emerged, dripping with hydraulic fluid and sweat, my jumpsuit now completely black with grease. The fasten seatbelt sign flicked off. The captain's voice came over the speaker, sounding like he'd just aged 10 years. "Ladies and gentlemen, we are beginning our descent. We've regained primary systems thanks to the expert assistance of a passenger and a damn good engineer. We'll be on the ground in 10 minutes. The cabin erupted. People were sobbing with relief, reaching out to touch my arm as I walked back to my seat. When I reached first class, the silence returned. Henderson was huddled in his seat, his $5,000 suit ruined by wine and sweat, looking like a broken umbrella. I stopped at his row. I didn't say anything at first. I just took a greasy rag out of my pocket and wiped a smear of black oil off my forehead, letting a drop fall right onto his pristine leather armrest. "Still worried about the smell, Henderson?" I asked quietly. He couldn't even meet my eyes. He just stared at his shoes. I didn't know. I'm sorry. I was stressed." "No," I said, leaning in. "You weren't stressed. You were showing who you really are when you think you're untouchable. You think money buys you a higher place in the world, but it doesn't buy you a pass to be a coward. When the engine stopped, your net worth was zero. My tools were the only thing that had value." The lead flight attendant walked up, handed me a bottle of water, and looked at Henderson with professional disdain. "Mr. Vance, the captain wants to see you after we taxi. And regarding this passenger, I've already filed a report for harassment of a crew-authorized specialist during an emergency." I nodded. "Make sure the airline's corporate office sees it. I don't think a man who hates the working class so much should be forced to rely on us to get him from A to B. Maybe he'd prefer to walk across the Atlantic next time." We touched down with a puff of tire smoke, the most beautiful sound I'd ever heard. As the passengers cheered, Henderson was met at the gate by security, not for arrest, but for a permanent ban from the airline. I walked off that plane with grease under my fingernails and a tool bag in my hand. People spend their whole lives trying to get into first class. Me? I'm happy right where I am. Because when the world starts falling out of the sky, I'm not the one screaming, I'm the one with the wrench, landing confirmed.